Okay, hello. This is the 13th lesson in a series of lectures on how the United States is starting a new Cold War with Russia. And we've been talking about how the U.S. is starting a new nuclear arms race with Russia. Right. So today's topic is a brief chronology of how U.S. abrogation of the ABM treaty is destabilizing and fueling a nuclear arms race. All right. So we'll go back to the ABM treaty, and it was signed by both U.S. and USSR in 1972. All right, and it limited USA and USSR to one battery of 100 anti-ballistic missiles each. All right. And the U.S. installed its ABM system in North Dakota to protect ICBMs and thus to increase the survivability of retaliatory strike deterrence. The Soviets, on the other hand, installed their ABM system to protect Moscow. All right, so reasons behind the ABM treaty, we'll go through a number of these. Now, the first is if there's a belief in an effective defense against ICBMs, this will motivate the construction of more ICBMs to overcome that defense. And MIRVs, which are multiple independent reentry vehicles, to overcome the defense, fueling a dangerous, destabilizing arms race. All right, it's just pouring gasoline on the fire. And then the ABM systems themselves will also become yet another element of that dangerous arms race, tit for tat, getting one better in ABM systems. Now, because nuclear stability is based upon the deterrence of mutually assured destructions, ABM systems are destabilizing because they can reduce the retaliatory strike capability. All right. By leaving all but a small portion of each nation, the small portion that is North Dakota and Moscow, right? All but a small portion of each nation totally vulnerable to a nuclear attack, the deterrence effect of MAD is enhanced. ABMs cannot be counted on to effectively defend against a surprise first strike for many reasons. First, each side having roughly 10,000 nuclear warheads, making it hard to get them all. Each side having MIRVs, multiple independent reentry vehicles, making it hard to get all of them. For example, one missile here, Soviet missile, the R-36M, had 10 warheads and 40 decoys. So you got 50 targets from one missile you're trying to, get, and you're trying to get them all. The advantage of the element of surprise of a first strike over a reactive ABM response. Short reaction times, less than 30 minutes you got before the ICBMs of first strike come in. And you can have super short reaction times if the missiles are launched by submarines closer to your shores or air launched from planes that are closer to the home. Also, there have been developed hypersonic and hypermaneuverable missiles that can evade ABMs. ABMs can be perceived to be better offensive weapons when they're used in conjunction with the first strike, thus increasing the risk of a first strike, and that being destabilizing. All right, the first strike idea is the first strike takes out the majority of your adversary's ICBMs, leaving only a ragtag remnant, which an ABM system can more effectively shoot down all of them. All right. Then in 1988, the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty was signed, banning ground-launched nuclear missiles with a range between 500 to 5,500 kilometers. Right. Air and sea-launched missiles of that range were not included in the treaty, right? So they weren't excluded. Impetus for the treaty was a 1979 Soviet deployment of SS-20 missiles. It's an advancement. It had solid rocket fuel, so it could be launched fast. It had 3 MIRVs, and it had a pretty good range, 5,000 miles. Now, they deployed them to replace their old SS-4s, which were deployed way back in 59, and SS-5s deployed way back in 62. These are crap missiles, right? So they're updating it. Now, the missiles were intended to deter a NATO attack and and were not restricted by the SALT II treaty, which focused on the big ICBMs, the intercontinental ballistic missiles, not intermediate range. Now, at the time of the treaty, there were nuclear weapons within Europe, right, which involves INF, intermediate range weapons. UK and France had nuclear weapons, and both USA and West Germany deployed the nuclear Pershing 1 missile. It was a solid rocket fuel missile, only one warhead, as opposed to the SS-20, which had 3. In response to the SS-20, the USA on December 12th of 79 deployed 108 Pershing 2, advancement of the Pershing 1, and 464 ground-launched cruise missiles. These are the Tomahawk types, ground-launched. And they positioned these in 5 locations: Great Britain, West Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, and Italy, right? So the idea is the INF Treaty was a de-escalation, because this was an escalation. The Soviets, installing a brand new missile, much more effective. And then the U.S. responding by, upping the ante here. And then they said, okay, we better dial it down here and have a treaty. So, all right. Then in September 11th of 2001, of course, that was a 9/11 attacks by who? Al Qaeda, not Iraq, not Iran, right? The Bush administration immediately moved in trying to pin this on Iraq, and also planning to use the Al Qaeda attack to attack Iraq. I mean, day one they're planning this. To exploit the atmosphere of fear and hysteria, from the Al Qaeda attack and all that irrational environment, right? To manipulate the masses into justifying an attack upon Iraq. So 3 months later, they did the very same trick to justify abrogation of the ABM treaty, and it worked. Based upon the bogus threat of both WMD and ballistic missile. You got to have both WMD and ballistic missiles to warrant an ABM system. And these were supposedly possessed by or being developed by rogue states and non-states. Non-states being like a terrorist group. Doesn't have a state. Now, as I will show you, this was, at that time, and still is, total bullshit lies. All right. Passed off to the American public and our governmental representatives. Right? Not the sharpest tools in the shed. All right. December of 2001, Bush administration announces that it's going to abrogate the ABM treaty, exploiting the irrational atmosphere of fear and hysteria caused by the Al Qaeda attacks on 9/11. Right? Al Qaeda, not Iraq or Iran. Right? So it was an illegitimate transference of threat. Right? You see how they put the fear onto Iraq and Iran, right? Due to an attack by Al Qaeda. All right. Then in June of the following year, 2002, the Bush administration officially abrogated the ABM treaty, making the USA the first nation to exit a major arms control treaty since World War II. That's something to be proud of, right? Deployment of ABMs will disrupt the nuclear balance and thereby increase risk of a first strike and thus be destabilizing. That's the logic, right? And then in November of 2002, the Bush administration wasted no time and began negotiations with Poland and the Czech Republic for deployment of a ABM missile system, right? With the missiles in Poland and the guidance radar in the Czech Republic. Right? So this threatened to disrupt the nuclear balance in Europe, which involves intermediate range nuclear weapons, INF, due to the ranges between Europe and Russia. Okay? All right. Then in February of 2007, the USA started formal negotiations with Poland and the Czech Republic to install those ABMs. Now, right after that, in February 15th, in response to this U.S. threat, Putin warned of a new Cold War and that Russia may counter this threat by installing short-range nuclear missiles, or INF missiles, right? Bordering NATO nations in East Europe in violation of the INF Treaty. All right, so whenever you see the green here, this is when they're saying, oh, we're going to, if you install these ABMs, hey, you're jacking us with a threat. We're going to have to counter, accommodate that threat by deploying INF. All right? So they're saying it over and over. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. At least 6 times. All right? I could have missed some times when someone said something about this. All right? So another time when this was mentioned is the chief of the general staff of the armed forces of Russia. This is the top military guy, Yuri something. Stated that Russia will unilaterally withdraw from the INF Treaty because, 1, U.S. deployment of ABM missiles in Eastern Europe was a violation of the INF Treaty. Well, it's not really a violation of the wording of the INF, but it's necessitating that the Russians have to violate the INF. And other nuclear-capable NATO nations were not limited by the bilateral treaty between the USA and Russia. For example, UK and France have nuclear weapons, and the USA has B-61 nuclear bombs located throughout Europe, which are not part of the INF because they're not ground-launched missiles. They're bombs, right? But these bombs can be delivered by stealth planes, right? Like the F-35, B-2, and B-21, all stealth, leaving essentially zero reaction time. Why? Because these planes, right, are designed to evade radar, and they can penetrate into the airspace and be right over the target when they release their bombs, right? Leaving essentially zero reaction time. So I expect this to be attacked by bullshit attacks like UK and France do not have nukes in Europe, right, in European soil. Right? I believe they're pretty much all in submarines these days. Oh, I think France has them on aircraft carriers too. Yeah, that's right. So it's not on, in European soil, but it doesn't matter because British and French soil is totally in play because that is an integral part of mutually assured destruction deterrence. Right? The whole stability of this is holding each other's territories hostage to a retaliatory strike. All right. So ABMs are important to that. Now, the B-61s, right? So the next bullshit one is, well, the B-61s are bombs, they're not missiles. Yeah, but like I said, the reaction time to a B-61 delivered by a stealth plane is about zero. Far less than a missile. You fire off a missile, you got far more warning time than zero. All right? 2008, the U.S. accused Russia of testing its SSC cruise missile, capable of carrying a nuclear weapon, and with a range of 2,000 miles, which is within that INF restriction. All right? Now, they were testing and not deploying, but you know what? Testing is not allowed by the INF. The wording of the INF says, you're not supposed to. So this is a violation. But hell, don't forget that they're violating this because we violated the ABM treaty. So who are we to point the fingers when we jammed them with this? We initiated this. All right. So then, here is the time we jammed Russia with the threat of NATO expansion for Ukraine and Georgia. Hopefully you remember this and how that was all about threatening Russia's gas sales to Europe. Right? So between February 14th and a couple weeks later, April 1st, all right, of 2008, the U.S. Senate, the House, and the President, clean sweep, all pushed forth. They jammed Russia with the threat of accelerated NATO membership for both Ukraine and Georgia, amid Ukraine screwing Russia with gas transit to Europe in multiple ways, right? And Europe being threatened, with energy security, is pushing hard for 3 non-Russian gas pipelines, right, to replace Ukraine, all of which go through Georgia. So these two are totally linked together, right? So this is a prior example of USA jamming Russia with a threat, right? Getting them to respond, which we then point the finger and say, "Hey, see, they're the aggressors." A typical get you again game, right? Then in July 4th of 2008, the Polish government rejected U.S. installation of ABMs in Poland. They said, "No, forget it. We're not going to." Right? That's in July, right? Then in July 8th, the Russian Foreign Ministry stated that if the missile defense systems, the ABMs, was approved, we would be forced to react not with diplomatic but with military technical methods. What does that mean? For example, that means deploying weapon systems like the INF missiles, like the SS-8 cruise missiles. All right. Then on August 1st of that year, South Ossetia starts its independence move, and Putin set this up. This is a little tricky move by Putin, right? They started shelling Georgian villages across the South Ossetia border, right? South Ossetia being a province within Georgia, all right? And then it takes Georgia 6 days. I mean, so they seriously must not have their act together if it takes them 6 days to respond, right? I'm serious, So Georgia responds in 6 days by invading South Ossetia, all right? And then the very next day, Putin uses the Georgia military response as a pretext to invade. This was Putin's plan all along. And he started a 5-day war in which Russia got the Georgian president to promise not to join NATO. Once he got that, then Putin backed out by August 18th. All right? So, in the meantime, on August 14th, 1 week after Putin invaded Georgia, Poland does a 180 flip-flop reverse, backtrack and says, "Oh, okay, we'll take those missiles, right? We rejected it. We just rejected it, but now we'll take it, right?" Announces a deal with the U.S. to install the missiles. Right? I mean, do you think that the Russian invasion of Georgia did not influence Poland into accepting a missile defense system on their land? All right? I mean, Russia invades Poland. I mean, Georgia, right? It gets them Polish worried. Oh, crap. We got an aggressive, possibly expansionist, military threatening Russia close to us, right? We better go get this missile system, right? And who maneuvered or manufactured the Georgia crisis? Well, USA, by jamming them with this threat, right? All right. So then Russia responded to the ABM installation, quote, "cannot go unpunished," and Russia's NATO envoy Dmitry Rogozin declared that the ABM missiles were not really directed at an Iranian threat, but rather against Russia, stating the fact that this was signed in a period of a very difficult crisis in the relations between Russia and the United States over the situation in Georgia shows that, of course, the missile defense system will be deployed not against Iran, but against the strategic potential of Russia. I mean, that's what I just said here, right? So they get it. It's like, duh. And don't forget, the whole idea that Iran is a threat is total bullshit. There's going to be no benefit to Iran for attacking a European nation. There'll only be big losses, right? Economically, militarily, strategically, as far as regional threats, right? They're vulnerable. They got no nuke, so why are they going to bother, right? The missile is out of range of Poland, right? And Um, Romania's not even talked about, but it doesn't cover all of Romania. Iran history of not aggressively launching a major offensive, but just doing its peddly proxy crap. And then lastly, well, if we're worried about Iran hitting a NATO country, in Europe, well, why not put missiles in Turkey, which is right next to, on the border with Iran? And what about Bulgaria, that's closer, or Greece, that's closer, or Albania, that's at least it's closer than Poland, and it's about the same distance as Romania? Why not there? Oh, is it because Poland and Romania are directly opposed in between Russia and Europe? Right? November 5th of 2008, Russia is clearly threatened by the potential ABM systems stationed in a NATO country in Eastern Europe. In his State of the Nation speech, Russian President Medvedev said, quote, "From what we have seen in recent years, the creation of a missile defense system, the encirclement of Russia with military bases, and the relentless expansion of NATO, we have gotten a clear impression that they are testing our strength." All right. In response to the ABM missiles, Russia threatened to deploy nuclear-capable Iskander missiles with a range of 500 kilometers. That's in the INF Treaty. To the isolated Russian enclave of Kaliningrad. All right. So here is Kaliningrad. Here is Russia. Okay, that's Estonia. Where's Belarus? That's Belarus here. All right. So Russia is like here. Well, part of Russia is way over here. It's like a separate piece that sits in an island all by itself, apart from Russia. Right. But that is Russia, and they're worried about this being threatened with all these missiles and crap. So they're saying, well, we're going to have to protect this by putting in INF treaty violating short-range missiles into Kaliningrad. Right? So is Russia threatened? Well, yeah. Who's expanding? Is Russia expanding, or is the West expanding? Is NATO expanding? And who's initiating? It's not Russia. It's a USA jamming them with the threat of installing ABM missiles for bullshit, bogus reason. Iran, my ass. Now, do Russians see a threat to Kaliningrad? Yeah, obviously, right? All right. Then on 17 September 2009, President Obama announces that the U.S. will not deploy the long-range SM-3 Block 2As. It's got long range here and a very high speed, Mach 15, right? Because U.S. intelligence indicates that Iranian ballistic missile programs is focusing upon short-range missiles. And what I say here? Duh, right? I mean, why is this so obvious, right? That is a duh. Well, Iran's focus is all in the Middle East. Where's Iran's main threat? Right? In Europe? Hell no. Why should they even give a damn about Europe? Why should they even look in that direction? Their main threat is a Sunni threat. And their main interest is supporting their proxies. All right? Who comes up with this stupid-ass crap? Well, Iran's thinking about hitting, Romania. What the hell for? In response to Obama's announcement, Medvedev announced they would not install Iskander missiles in Kaliningrad. All right, 2010. The U.S. announced plans to install the SM-3 Block 1B, that's this missile here, shorter range, 378 mile, Mach 10, is not as fast, right? Missile in Romania. So now Romania is in play. Remember up here, it's all Poland, right? And then in February 2010, Romania agrees to host the missiles at this place here. I don't know how to say that. Starting in 2015, initial plans to upgrade the missiles to Block 2A, the long-range fast ones. Okay. Then in 2013, the construction of the ABM base in Romania begins, right? 2015, July 14th, that's when you had the nuclear deal signed with Iran. And now you have UN weapons inspectors with 24/7 access to Iran nuclear sites. So we know for sure that Iran has no nuclear weapons. No nukes. Remember, the condition was stated by the Bush abrogation. You got to have WMD and ballistic missile. Well, sorry, no WMD in Iran. All right. Okay, then in May of 2016, U.S. announces activation of the ABM base in Romania, right? So according to newspaper Reuters, at the opening ceremony, both the State Department, this guy Frank Rose, who's Deputy U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Arms Control, and Department of Defense, Robert Work, U.S. Deputy Defense Secretary, both of them stated that the purpose of the ABMs is to defend against an Iranian ballistic missile attack. Iran, right? That's who it's directed at, right? Then Mr. Work added that the missiles would not be used against any future Russian missile threat. Oh, bullshit. That's just talking out the side of your mouth, right? Right? You got those missiles there. That's a threat to Russian, the balance, the nuclear balance in Europe. So then, quote, Russian President Vladimir Putin's office said Moscow also doubted NATO's stated aim of protecting the alliance against Iranian rockets following the historic nuclear deal with Tehran and word policy last year that Russia helped to negotiate, which now we know for sure because we're there on in their nuclear facilities. We know they have no nukes or nuclear weapons program. All right, just to show you that the threat was believed to be Iran. Here's NATO missile shield. All right. Who's the threat? Iran. Right. Where's the shield? Poland and Romania. Not Turkey, which is right next to it. There's Iran, right next door. Right. Here's Bulgaria, even closer. Here's Greece, even closer. Albania is at least as far away as Romania. Right. Why not there? All right. Then the very next day, one day after the ceremony in Romania, Mr. Work attended a groundbreaking ceremony in Poland to begin construction of another ABM complex for Poland, for both Block 1B and 2A missiles. All right. Putin's response to the ABM threat, quote, as these elements of ballistic missile defense are deployed, Russia will be, quote, forced to think about how to neutralize emerging threats to Russian Federation. All these are additional steps toward throwing the international security system off balance and unleashing a nuclear arms race. Well, duh! I mean, this is obvious. Right? You don't have to be a rocket scientist genius to figure this. Is like, anyone with half a brain could figure this out. So review. Iran is a target of the ABM systems, right? Iran, right? But Iran has no nukes, no WMD, and no Iranian ballistic missile can hit Poland, and only two of the missiles can hit part of Romania, right? Not all of Romania, just like 2/3, right? So it's like barely touching Romania. Iran has zero to gain from attacking any East European nation. Iran's concerns are all in the Middle East. Why is it even looking at East Europe? Right? They're worried about the Sunnis. They want to support their proxies for whatever reason. Right? Iran has everything to lose from attacking the East European nation, especially a NATO nation, right? Which is going to devastate their economy. Big-time sanctions are going to be slapped on Iran. It's going to devastate their economy. And then NATO's going to have to respond to an attack. So they're going to whack Iran all the ballistic missiles. I told you what else they're going to have to do. They'll first come in, whack the early warning. Then they'll whack their air defense, SAMs and fighter interceptors. Then they'll take out their command and control. Then they'll take out their communications. Yeah, that's a classic pattern. That's textbook, right? That's a basic playbook you always run. Okay. So what is that going to do? That's going to leave Iran naked and vulnerable to the real threat, the Sunni nations, or to an Israeli preemptive strike. Right? It's like, yeah, that was pretty smart, right? It's like, you dumbass. I can't believe you didn't. Right? Anyways, since its inception in 1979, the Iranian government has been highly cautious to avoid a major retaliatory attack, and so they've never initiated a large offensive war. All right? Not Iran. All right? Get that through your head. Right? If you think, oh, they're going to go invade Israel, oh, bullshit. They only do low-intensity things like support proxies or laying floating mines. Remember when they laid floating mines in the Persian Gulf in response to the U.S. escorting Iraqi oil, which is an act of war? Right? They thought they can get away with that possibly. You know, one of our ships, the Samuel B. Roberts, hit a floating mine, and in retaliation, we whacked them hard in Operation Praying Mantis, sinking roughly half their Navy, right? Whacking a bunch of their oil platforms, which were being used by their, little speedboats were harassing shipping. Okay. All right. Now, don't forget the Bush abrogation of the ABM treaty required both WMD and ballistic missiles, right? Right? They don't have ballistic missiles that can hit Poland. They have no nukes. Finally, if Iran really is a threat to Eastern Europe, why didn't we install ABM systems in Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Albania, which are all closer to Iran, right? In fact, Turkey, like I said, is right on the border with Iran, right? Is it because in terms of Russia, these countries are off to the side and out of the way, right? Whereas Poland and Romania form a wall between Russia and Europe, who has nuclear weapons. So let's take a look at the map here. So here's Iran, the big scary threat, right? Iran's going to throw, for some unknown nameless reason, they're going to throw a ballistic missile at Romania or Poland. Well, they can't even hit Poland, right? Well, if this is really a concern, why not in Turkey? Why not in Bulgaria? Why not in Greece or Albania? Could it be that they're off to the side and out of the way when it's in terms of Russia vis-a-vis Europe? But look at the position of Poland, right? This is like a tennis net, a volleyball court net, right between Russia and Europe. And Europe has nuclear weapons. In Great Britain, in France, U.S. Nuclear bombs in Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, 2 places in Italy up here, and then 1 place in Turkey down here somewhere. All right, so then in February of 2017, U.S. officials accused Russia of violating the INF treaty by their installing 2 batteries of 24 cruise missiles, the SSC-8 cruise missiles, 2,000-mile range, right? 1 battery is in Caspian Yar, which is out here. That's like a nuclear test site for the Russians, right? Why did they put it out there? Well, probably because it's way out there, nowhere's land, right? It's near Kazakhstan, so they can probably give a damn. All right. So the other one, I don't know where the other location is. So it's 48 missiles though. Now, at least 6 times Russia warned the U.S. that if they installed ABMs, they would upset the nuclear balance in Europe, and that Russia must respond and counter this threat by installing INF missiles. Of course, Americans will ignore this fact, right, and just point the finger at Russia. Oh, it's all Russia's fault. So I Googled the distance between Caspian Yar and Berlin, which is roughly about there, and that's 37 miles, right? So I'm assuming these can hit London, maybe more of England, probably all of France, most of France. I'm sure Paris is included, right? So these missiles have that range, right? But they're not ballistic missiles, and there's only 48 of them. Now to show you why that's such an insignificant number, all right? Here's a list of U.S. cruise missiles. So this is a cruise missile. U.S. has 3 cruise missiles in the same category, in the same range, all right? This is the AGM-129. It's a stealth cruise missile, and U.S. has 461 of these. This is another air-launched cruise missile. U.S. has 536 of these, and this is an underwater launched out of submarine torpedo tubes cruise missile, the Tomahawk missile here, the 109 here, and I don't know how many of these are. We have these, but I'm sure it's in the hundreds. All right. So when you talk about the big scary number, 48 additional of these, that's so damn scary. Well, how does that compare to hundreds and hundreds here? Right? I mean, come on. Right? Right? This is just a token drop in the bucket. Now, keep in mind that U.S. instigated deployment of these 48 missiles, right? Plus, the 48 missiles is really just a drop in the bucket when you compare it to all these missiles, but U.S. has, right? Right? Now, I'm not saying that Russia doesn't have air-launched and sub-launched missiles, right? But I'm saying that these 48 compared to the overall number of just cruise missiles is ridiculous, right? So if you look at both of those facts, U.S. instigated, drop in a bucket, this, you come to see that this stupid cartoon is total bullshit, right? Oh, the big bad Russia, yeah, evil, you can't trust it, right? Big fangs, right? Big claws, right? Missile deployment, wow, 48 missiles. What a load of crap. All right. So now the threat to Russia is European nuclear weapons protected by anti-ballistic missile systems. Right there. You got a defensive line. So what is the European nuclear weapons arsenal? Well, Britain has both has ballistic missile submarines firing the Trident, USA Trident II sub-launch ballistic missile with a range of 4,000 miles. France has ballistic missile submarines, and they have air-launched cruise missiles carried by Rafale fighter planes. I believe they're stationed upon French aircraft carriers, right? The Rafales are I guess, a multi-versatile fighter that can launch from ground or ships carriers. USA also has B-61 nuclear bombs in Germany, Belgium, Italy, Netherlands, Turkey, which can be carried by stealth aircraft, resulting in near zero response time for Russia, which, to me, that's first strike capability. So here's the bomb here. It's a thermonuclear bomb, meaning it's a hydrogen bomb, not a uranium bomb, a fission bomb, or plutonium bomb, right? These are the big boys. Power of the sun, basically. Fusion reaction, not a fission reaction. 340 kilotons, 17 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So each one of these is worth 17 of those bombs. Let's see here. So Great Britain has nuclear weapons, France has nuclear weapons, U.S. has bombs that can be carried by stealth planes in Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, 2 places in Italy, and in Turkey. All right. Okay. Now these weapons are being protected by ABM system, and that's what's worrying Russia. Right? Possibly given these first strike capability. So the ABM protections for the European nuclear arsenals are these SM-3 missiles. All right, and they're primarily focusing on. There's more types in this. I know there's a 2B now, or not to be. But the 1B has a range of 378 miles, speed Mach 10. The 2A is better with 1,350 miles, speed Mach 15. All right, so here's the 1B. Here's the 2A. All right. Now the distance between Warsaw and Moscow is 1,265 miles, so less than this. What that means, here's Warsaw, roughly right about there in the east of Poland. Moscow's over here somewhere, right? This means that this missile has a range that goes beyond Moscow, which means it's covering a wide area, right? And it's very fast. All right, then in March 2018, In response to the U.S. ABMs being installed in Romania and Poland, Putin unveiled development of a hypersonic, hypermaneuverable avant-garde nuclear missile to counter the U.S. ABMs. Putin said, "We had to create these weapons in response to the U.S. deployment of a strategic missile defense system, which in the future would be able to actually neutralize, nullify our entire nuclear potential." Right? So it's an escalation. Now, you know what? They're still testing the SM-3 Block 2A, right? You know, it's shot down, it intercepted, right? But they're still working on it, right? But even though they're still working, now they got a means of countering something which is not even proven to be 100% effective yet, right? So they're ahead of the game already, right? It's just going to be, it's going to be, up in the ante, tit for tat, right? And this is just ridiculous, right? We're not even keeping up as it is. Now the U.S. is developing counter hypersonic missiles, right? So now, because they developed this, well, we got to, improve our ABMs and develop a missile that can shoot down the hypersonic, hypermaneuverable missiles. So who's working on that? Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, right? It's like a feudal Sisyphean arms race. But the more feudal, the more money will be made by the military-industrial complex. Money better spent on things to make the USA more commercially competitive, grow the economy, provide a better life, cheaper electricity, cheaper transportation, less costs from climate change, things like that. But no, instead we play some stupid nuclear weapons arms race, right? Which is like a Sisyphean futile act. Remember Sisyphus from Greek mythology had to roll up this damn boulder to the top hill every day, only for it to roll back down to the bottom, and the next day he's got to roll back up, only for it to roll back down. Up and down, getting nowhere. Right? In fact, we're getting further behind here. All right. Okay. So in December 4 of 2018, the U.S. warned Russia that it has 6 months to remove the new INF cruise missiles, or the U.S. will abrogate the INF treaty. Right? Only 2 months later, in February, the Trump administration withdraws from the INF treaty, not waiting the 6 months. Right? Now why? Are they going to use the China excuse? I don't know. And then on 3/13, the Defense Department announced that it will begin testing 2 missiles whose range violates the INF Treaty. So we're violating the INF Treaty. We abrogated it, right? So now we're developing missiles. So escalation again, right? Fueling the nuclear arms race. And that's how you manufacture a new Cold War nuclear arms race. Easy peasy, right? Review of how the USA is cooking up a nuclear arms race. So just as the Bush administration exploited the irrational, atmosphere of fear and hysteria created by the 9/11 Al-Qaeda attacks, right, to manipulate the Americans into the Iraq invasion war, they used the same trick to justify abrogation of the ABM Treaty in December of 2001. The stated reason was state and non-state entities having or developing both WMD and ballistic missiles, and both must be present, and both were a big lie. No WMD, no nukes, and only Iran had missiles, ballistic missiles, that could hit only part of Romania and not Poland. All right, so don't forget that the USA totally lied and manufactured bullshit about Iraq WMD and Iraq Scud missiles, right? Remember I told you how Scott Ritter said, right? We told him we told him that, there's no Scuds anywhere, right? Our inspection showed that, and they took our report and said, oh, they got 200 Scuds. Well, what do you think? How can they say that? such friggin' liars. The Iranian threat to Europe, Eastern Europe, is a hilarious joke, but it was effectively fed to the American public and our government representatives. 1, Iran has no nukes. 2, Iran's ballistic missiles barely hit Romania and not Poland at all. There are NATO nations closer to Iran, but we didn't put missiles there. Missiles in Poland and Romania form a blocking line between Russia and Europe's nuclear arsenal, or retaliatory strike target territory for deterrence, mutually assured destruction, right? Iran has zero to gain from throwing a conventional bomb at Europe, a European nation. Iran has everything to lose from doing so economically, as far as defense, deterrence, ability destroyed by a NATO attack, leaving them wide open, vulnerable to their real enemy, the Sunni nations, or to an Israeli attack. The U.S. could possibly exploit attacks on Iran to sow internal revolt, instability, maybe create chaos and civil war. All of Iran's real concerns are in the Middle East. Why would they even be thinking of Eastern Europe, right? I mean, it's probably like the last thing on their mind. Oh, yeah, let's go throw a missile at Romania. We don't have a nuke. Since its inception in 1979, Iran has been highly cautious to avoid a major retaliatory strike and thus has never launched a major offensive war. All they have done is support their proxies. All this makes it utterly and completely stupid to think Iran would throw a ballistic missile at Eastern Europe. Right? No, you didn't convince me. That's not stupid. They'll do that. Why? What did I convince you about? What did I say? You said, well, the thing you said, you said, yeah, right, you don't even remember what I said. Given that the manufactured Iran threat to attack targets in Eastern Europe is a joke, and given that the missiles form a blocking wall between Europe and Russia, any intelligent person with half a brain would surmise that the U.S. abrogation of the ABM treaty once again is intended to push Russia's buttons, jam them with a threat to force them to react. A classic get you again game. And then when they react, we say, oh, look, see, they're aggressive, they're violating this, right? They're pushing the arms race. In response to this threat, Russia warned 6 times that if the USA installed ABMs in Europe, they would have to develop and deploy intermediate-range nuclear missiles in violation of the INF Treaty. At least 6 times they said that. Now, in 2016, U.S. ABMs in Romania are operational, and the U.S. breaks ground for ABM construction in Poland. Right? Russia responds by deploying 48 intermediate-range cruise missiles in Kaspian Yar and somewhere else. It's a token drop in the bucket. The U.S. accuses Russia of aggression and feeds this to Congress and the public, effectively portraying Russia as the big bad bear. But the 48 missiles were both instigated by USA and insignificant in terms of real numbers, basically token. You remember I showed you this? We got 461 of these, 536 of these, I don't know, hundreds of these, I'm not sure, it's in the hundreds, right? Well, what is an additional 48 here? That's like nothing, all right? Plus, we instigated this, right, by jamming them with an ABM system, right? So this is total bullshit, right? And I say here, Dave Granlund, strategic analysis by an idiot retard. Yeah, go back to your crayons and draw your cartoons. Right? That's about all you're good for. All right. The U.S. warns the Russians they have 6 months to remove missiles, or it will abrogate the INF Treaty. But after 2 months, the U.S. Abrogates the treaty. I mean, why? Because of China. INF is a bilateral treaty concerning Europe between U.S. and Russia. All right. USA then announced development of 2 INF weapon systems, fueling the nuclear arms race. U.S. abrogation of the ABM treaty accelerated Russian development of ABM evading re-entry technology, hypervelocity, hypermaneuverability, right? U.S. counters by working on developing ABMs that can shoot down hypersonic, hypermaneuverable Russian missiles, fueling the arms race. So here's the overall effect. U.S. unilateral abrogation of the ABM treaty for bullshit, bogus reasons where, no substance to Iran. U.S. ABMs in Romania and Poland does nothing to reduce the fictitious and really comical, hilarious, right, knee-slapping, rib-bursting joke that Iran is threatening to throw a ballistic missile with a conventional warhead at an Eastern European nation. Stated by both the State Department and the Defense Departments, right? The U.S. ABMs jammed Russia with a threat by upsetting the European nuclear balance, forcing Russia to respond by installing 48 intermediate-range cruise missiles. This was U.S. instigated, and it was also a drop in the bucket in terms of overall real numbers of missiles, INF missiles. The USA portrays Russia's defensive reaction, that was in response to our jamming them with ABMs, as an unprovoked act of aggression, and then spoon feeds that to both the American public and our representatives, who gobble that bullshit down like pig slop served on fine chinaware. Well, it must be good. It's served on our best china. Tastes good. It is a classic get-you-again game. Now, the USA, in turn, abandons the INF treaty and develops 2 INF missiles. Oh, that's great. Fuel the nuclear arms race with tit-for-tat escalation. To counter the ABM threat, Russia develops hypersonic, hypermaneuverable nuclear weapon systems that effectively evade U.S. ABMs, which are not even effectively shooting down the original reentry vehicles. Right? They're now another step ahead of us. In turn, the USA begins developing ABM systems that won't be outmaneuvered by Russian hypersonic, hypermaneuverable weapons. Now, no doubt this tit-for-tat arms race will go on and on and on, pouring gasoline on a new Cold War nuclear arms race, which will serve as more justification for the U.S. $1 trillion nuclear revamp program. $1 trillion. Right? The flow of collective resources will be controlled, and then well-positioned people will make a lot of money much better spent on boosting U.S. commercial competitiveness, promoting advances in U.S. commercial technology, switching to cheaper energy and transportation, combating the high cost of climate change, all of which will fuel economic growth, right? But no, we're going to be playing these stupid games just so these guys can get rich. Just get funds can be shifted towards their direction and they get rich. All right, I'm not going to review all this. I think I just went through all the factual, chronological details. All right, that's it for that